feel that way. Thank you. I'm happy to transition us to our opening plenary for the day. The opening plenary is opportunities and challenges for elections in 2018. We are going to be looking at a whole host of new laws that are all converging together in 2018 that are going to affect our elections. We've got an exciting panel to talk about that today. I am so pleased to introduce our moderator for the panel. We've had a slight change as our initial moderator, who is not able to join us today. But I'm so pleased to tell you that Gail Pellerin is joining us and moderating this panel. As many of you know, Gail is the Registrar of Voters and County Clerk in Santa Cruz County. She has served in that position since July 2004, but she's actually been running elections in Santa Cruz for about 25 years, to the great benefit of Santa Cruz voters. And as many of you know, she also was the president of the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials from 2010 to 2012. She previously served in the state legislature as well, so she knows what she's doing. And you know, Gail has been an integral member of the Future of California elections since its inception. She's a founding member who helped to create exactly what we're doing here today. I was pleased when the secretary mentioned that this feels like a family reunion. I couldn't agree more. And you know, there's always got to be that awesome family member who brings the fun to any reunion, and I'm pretty sure that's Gail. So I'm so glad that she's here today, Gail Pellerin.
Wow, that's the nicest introduction I've ever had. I have a candidate in my office who would use another word. I think it starts with B. Hang on, I ate some water. Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here today. Just want to give a shout out to International Women's Day today. So the women around the room, thank you for being here. So we have a very exciting opening plenary today, talking about opportunities and challenges for elections in 2018. And I like the positive note of this panel. We're talking about things that we can do that are better and more inclusive, and actually getting our voters involved more and improving their voter experience. And we have a panel of experts here today. So I'm just going to introduce each of them, and then we have the order of speaking that's already set up. You guys are set. Okay, so we have Lori Shellenberger. She is an election reform and voting rights strategist. She consults on and leads state and national efforts to build a more inclusive and representative democracy, including redistricting reform, National Voter Registration Act compliance, felony reenfranchisement, and integrated voter engagement. Previously, Ms. Shellenberger was the director of the ACLU of California's Voting Rights Project, and she was a member of FoCE. And her topic this morning will be the new Motor Voter Program. Just let everybody know who you are, Lori said. Okay. And then next we have Greg Diaz. He is the Clerk-Recorder Registrar of Voters for Nevada County, a position he has held since his appointment in June of 2007. Mr. Diaz has earned the California Professional Election Administrator credential and obtained SARA Certified Elections Registration Administrator status nationally through the Election Center. In June 2018, Mr. Diaz will lead Nevada County in implementing the California's Voters' Choice Act, along with the 4 other California counties. And Mr. Diaz's topic this morning will be his perspective on the implementation of SB 450, the California Voters' Choice Act. Mr. Diaz.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Joe Holland, the Santa Barbara County Clerk-Recorder, Assessor, Registrar of Voters, the longest title on our panel, was elected to the office in March 2002. Mr. Holland is currently the treasurer of the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials, and he is a member of FoCE. He chairs the CACEO Committee on Conditional Voter Registration, which will also be his topic for this morning's discussion. And then we have Kim Alexander, who is the president and founder of the California Voter Foundation, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization established in 1994 and dedicated to improving the voting process to better serve voters. Ms. Alexander is an active member of FoCE. She will cover third-party return of vote-by-mail ballots, signatures on vote-by-mail ballots. She's done a great study on the vote-by-mail ballot process. Our county was one of the counties participating in that. And a big issue for us, election funding issues, such as upgrading voting systems and state mandates. Kim. And last but not least, we'll have Dean Logan, who is the Registrar-Recorder, County Clerk for Los Angeles County, the nation's largest, most diverse, and complex local election jurisdiction, serving more than 5.2 million registered voters. I'm exhausted just saying that. He currently serves as president of the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials and the Pew Center on the state's Voter Registration Modernization and Performance Index for Elections Working Group. He is also a member of FoCE and serves on the board of directors for the National Election Center. Mr. Logan will provide an overview of election law changes over the past few years and will tie all these election opportunities and challenges together with a nice, neat bow. So without further ado, and I'm going to go down and take some pictures as well, so I'll be coming back and forth. So take it away.
All right, so I'm starting out, right, Gail? Am I first?
Yes, Lori's.
All right, so I am an elections consultant, but I'm sitting here with an ACLU hat on because I've had the privilege of getting to work on this issue both as the voting rights director there for many years. We started working on this 5 years ago to try and improve voter registration at DMV, and I continue to have the privilege of getting to lead that effort with a lot of really amazing stakeholders in California on behalf of ACLU. So just quickly, Secretary Padilla, as he already said on April 16th, California is going to launch an incredible state-of-the-art seamless voter registration system at all of its DMV offices online when you get your renewal in the mail, and you will have a very straightforward way to get registered to vote. And every eligible person who's a citizen and meets the eligibility requirements will get registered unless they opt out, and that opt-out will happen during the DMV transaction. So what does that mean? It does not mean, I don't like to use the word automatic because I think it connotes something that isn't actually going to be happening. So it does not mean that people who have a driver's license will suddenly be added to the voter rolls. This is not going to go into DMV's database and pull people and add them to the voter file. It means that moving forward, when someone goes to DMV to apply for a driver's license or state ID, to renew a license or to change their address, that the default option, if they affirm that they're a citizen and they're eligible to vote, will be to register, but they will have the opportunity to check a box and say they don't want to be registered at this time or update their voter registration. So it's incredibly exciting because what it means is that we're going to have an electronic transfer of the voter registration data that will ensure the accuracy of the voter information, and it should result in a real increase in the registration rate in California. Last year, DMV took a partial step toward automating the system with an electronic transfer and incorporating voter registration into its paper forms. And what we saw was, as compared to 2012, another presidential election year, voter registrations at DMV tripled just by the fact that we had a seamless way that it was incorporated into the transaction. We think that with making it the default option, that eligible voters will be more inclined to get registered and update their registration, and we'll see even higher numbers of registration at DMV. There are a few things that we're really proud of in California, and a couple of those I want to highlight. One is that the application at DMV is going to be available in 10 languages. So folks will really be able to fill out the DMV application and register to vote in their language, so they really understand the process. Second, advocates have been working very hard to ensure accessibility, and so in every field office, which is your local DMV office, there will be a fully accessible machine where someone can fill out that application. And the entire system will now be electronic, so you're actually filling out an electronic form. The other thing we're really excited about in California is that we've done extensive field testing. Both the government stakeholders, DMV, the California Department of Technology, and the Secretary of State have done field testing, and the Center for Civic Design, which is a usability, they're usability experts, and we've done extensive field testing in the field in language, in Spanish, in Vietnamese, in Chinese. Further testing is going to be going on this month in Korean and other languages. And so we're really working hard to get the language right, to make it as user-friendly as possible. And those of us who've been working on it have had a preview of the system, and it's really cool. And it's really easy to understand, and it explains every step. And if someone's not eligible to vote, it takes them out of that process so that no one who's ineligible gets registered. There are back-end data firewalls to ensure that the folks who have undocumented people who have the license, their data never gets transferred. No matter what happens during that application, it can't be transferred to the Secretary of State. So lots of protections in place. The thing that, and it's really echoing what Secretary Padilla brought up. It's a really great example, and I'm really proud of the way California stakeholders came together to put this system together, because it really is a model for the rest of the country. And so it's included for years since the legislation was introduced up until this very moment. Stakeholders like Disability Rights California, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the California Immigrant Policy Center, the ACLU, Common Cause and the League of Women Voters, and national experts like the Brennan Center for Justice and DEMOS, as well as meeting regularly with DMV and the Secretary of State to ensure that that broad, diverse set of stakeholders are involved in making the best policy possible that sort of balances that tension between making sure we register as many people as possible, and that voter registration is permanent and portable, so that no matter where you move or what your update is, you always stay registered to vote. But it's also balancing that with protections against inadvertent registration. And we feel California has really developed a system that is a model for the country, and it'll be exciting to see where it takes us.
Well, thank you, Lori. That was a good overview of what's coming. It's very exciting that April 16th is that launch date, so I'm looking forward to that. And our next speaker will be Greg Diaz, and he has a PowerPoint. In our PowerPoint, you got it all set, okay.
Do we have it all set?
Okay.
Good.
Okay, go ahead. I'll leave my water for you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Greg Diaz, Nevada County Registrar. I have a PowerPoint this morning. We're going to go through some of the steps in terms of implementing SB 450. And the last slide, I may have to go quickly during the first few slides, but the last slide, I have some perspectives and things that we have learned. So without much ado, Nevada County. We're calling it Expedition to Implementation. That's me. Okay. The Voters' Choice Act. We're using this logo right now. We're going to try to get a lot of uniformity in terms of the materials, our outreach and education materials. So that's the logo we're going to be using. True modernization of our current voting model makes voting more convenient and increases accessibility. Voting opportunities are broadened and challenges are mitigated through preparation. After initial inspection, obviously, we did a lot of research. We tried to analyze the bill, gain a better understanding of how this implementation would work. This allowed us to identify potential challenges and create solutions. The very first thing I did was ask my assistant, Sandy Schoberg, who is still here, Sandy? Hey, Sandy, there she is. I asked Sandy to put together pretty much 45-minute, hour presentation for each member of our Board of Supervisors. Sandy, along with a couple colleagues, went and made their presentation.
Mic's not on.
Oh, okay. This better? No? There's a light on. Okay, that's better. Okay. And we met with each and every one of our 5 board members. Very insightful to see their feedback, understand their feedback. Frankly, there wasn't much feedback. we thought we had a real educational process that they had accepted during that time. Next. Throughout the analysis, we looked at several important factors regarding the siting of vote centers and drop-off location. And every county will go through this, and this is just a few of the bullets. Population centers, accommodating geographically isolated populations. Geographical nature of our county. We're a very rural county. We have a big hill sort of separating Western County and Truckee. We have a big hill. Back in the old days, they would fly ballots back. When I first came, they offered that to me, and I politely declined. We have another way to get ballots back. Ensuring that locations are accessible and convenient, proximity to public transport. Okay. We use Sierra County, one of our neighboring counties, and Sierra's been a vote-by-mail county for years, and it's worked well for them. Nevada County has trended toward being a primarily vote-by-mail county. When I first came, we were 61% VBM. 2016, we were 82%. Next. We established our VAC and LAC, Voter Language Accessibility Advisory Committees. The VAC has been extremely helpful with not only our disability community, but our senior population as well. Okay. Our LAC has brought the town of Truckee largely into the fold as a major populace of second language speakers. We decided to create an outreach and education committee. It's not required with the bill, but I felt there were too many gaps. We have LAC, we have VAC, and the Outreach and Education Committee allowed us to look at different perspectives and to hear from different folks in our community. And I think it's been a good committee for us. I was going to make a joke about the shape of our county, but I'm going to leave that. We also created a location committee to help with locations for vote centers and drop boxes. We reached out to prospective locations and documented their details. Okay, last slide here, 2 minutes to go. Advantages, no wrong place to vote. That's a lot of our messaging, and I'm sure the registrars understand it's probably one of the more common questions during any election cycle. Ballot security, instead of 49 polling places, some of them in pretty remote areas, the 7 vote centers allows us to increase and enhance our ballot security. Ballot accountability, this flies under the radar sometimes, but in a vote by mail situation, each and every ballot cast will have an associated signature attached to it. Obviously, you know, voters need to sign the envelope. We do signature verification, and even at the vote centers, if someone is getting a replacement ballot, they'll have to sign a roster and we'll create a label. So each and every ballot cast will have a signature associated with it. Cost efficiency, it's just going to be cheaper for us. Cost savings, that pertains to new election equipment. We're thinking we'll be saving around $1 million next year when we buy new equipment. Following voter trends, increased transparency, community involvement, increased turnout in other states. I was going to remove that bullet because I forgot what that was associated with. Anyway, faster canvassing because we're not going to have many provisionals. CVR processing at all the vote centers. Disadvantages. We had an issue with the EAP requirements in the regulations. It was a lot of work, and we think maybe that could have been handled better in the legislation. A lot of the requirements and guidelines are given to counties, and we already have a pretty strong knowledge of our landscape. Legislation is too prescriptive and needs to be more goal-oriented. Don't have time, I have to stop. But initial startup costs, more flexibility for staffing vote centers. I mean, I put in parentheses, for us to be open on Memorial Day, I'm paying double time. I mean, really? But yes, really, we have to. And more discretion about how we inform our voters of changes, the 2 direct contacts. Part 2 is at 4 p.m. this afternoon, so stay tuned. Thank you.
Keep your mic. Okay. Thank you, Greg. Our next speaker is Joe Holland, and you're going to use the mic. Okay. Are you going to be up here?
Yeah, because that way I can see that.
Okay, cool.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Good? Okay, good. So I'm going to talk about conditional voter registration. And in particular, I'm going to talk about how the main focus will be on, I think, all county registrars with conditional voter registration taking effect for the first statewide election. We're all getting some pressure to, well, why can't we have conditional voter registration at all polling places? So what I'd like to do is address that. I feel that the best way to first address that is to just talk a little bit about the history going back to National Voter Registration Act of 1993. And then what's happened since then, it was in 2000 that Senator Hertzberg, Assemblymember Hertzberg, reduced the registration deadline from 29 days to 15 days. This caused a lot of consternation for elections administration officials back then. It compressed the time we had to do work. Another big thing that happened was permanent vote by mail in 2001. That took effect in 2002. That actually relieved pressure on election administrators because we would typically get thousands upon thousands of requests for absentee ballots that we would then have to process, package the ballot, and send it out. So that kind of relieved a little stress. Next slide, please. Same-day registration. In 2009, I was working with then Secretary of State Deborah Bowen on putting together some legislation for same-day registration. So that's 2009. CVR didn't take effect till 2017. Real implementation is now in 2018. One of the concerns that I had, and in talking with other election administration officials back then, was in Santa Barbara County, we have UCSB, and if all those students waited to the last minute to register to vote, it was going to be chaos, and we would have a lot of disenfranchised voters. So we talked about adding the requirement of having conditional voter or same-day registration at the permanent office of the elections officials so you could handle that type of volume. And CACEO supported that legislation in 2009. Going to the next slide. Conditional voter registration. First of all, cover, it was in September 2012, online voter registration. Then conditional voter registration was actually passed in 2012. And it was conditioned upon VOCAL being certified by the Secretary of State. It would take effect at January 1. Another thing that happened in 2015 is conditional voter registration allowed satellite offices only on election day. Senator Allen removed only on election day, so now you can have satellite offices before election day. Okay, so, and then, of course, we have the California New Motor Voter Program in place now. Then Secretary of State certified VOCAL in 2016. Then 2017, that conditional voter registration took effect. And then in April, we're going to have automatic registration. So the Secretary of State came out with proposed regulations, which is this slide here, saying that CVR shall be offered at the permanent offices of the elections official. And you may have conditional voter registration at satellite offices. But you can see there's some pretty big requirements here in terms of electronic capacity to provide a ballot type for anybody that walks into a satellite office. So two big challenges. One, if you have a satellite office, you need to have that technology in there to provide that ballot. So that means that you need to have qualified poll workers that know how to use that technology. So we estimated that if we were to have a polling place be a satellite office, that we would need at least 4 other people in addition to the poll workers there that were highly trained to use that technology. So that was a big hurdle. And that is why you're not going to find election administrators just willy-nilly making polling places satellite offices. So currently, if a registered voter walks into a polling place that they're not registered at, we will give them a provisional ballot if they ask for it, and we will count that ballot, but only for the contests that apply. So the question then comes with now CVR, if a non-registered voter walks in, requests that they want to vote, and it's on election day, we'll give them a provisional ballot, but we will not count it. It's against the law to count that ballot. It's just not allowed. My guess is that someone's going to challenge that. In a close contest, we're probably going to be taken to court. My inclination as an election administrator would be count that ballot. But it's against the law. So we're not going to do it. Now, could we change that law? Yes, you could change that law. And I've even suggested that. But the implication with that is that if you have that voter walks in and they're given a ballot and it has contests on there which they're not allowed to vote, or vice versa, they're not allowed to vote at a contest they would have otherwise been able to vote had they gotten the proper ballot, that is going to be contested also in a closed election. So there's really no way to balance that. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. The real answer is we need to go to vote centers where we have the capability to provide the proper ballot to anybody that walks in on election day and registers to vote. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next, we got Kim. You're coming up here too? See, I don't get the podium. I'll take my water.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great, thanks. So we could go on to the next slide. I'm going to just give you a quick overview about California Voter Foundation. As Gail said, we were established in 1994. And our current priorities are equal treatment and opportunities for voters, more funding for election administration, and voting system security, meaningful auditing of ballots. And could you go back to that? We're online at calvoter.org. We're in the process of redesigning our website, so please be patient. We'll have a new look coming for you soon. So I'm going to cover a couple topics with you today, and they're summarized here. It's a lot to go through, so we'll just go on to the next slide and share with you some thoughts about the first challenge that I see coming for this election year in California, which is filled with lots of great opportunities. One challenge we face is that there are varying models now in neighboring counties. We have 5 counties implementing the Voters' Choice Act, where there will be no neighborhood polling places on election day, but there will be vote centers available throughout the county for multiple days prior to the election. Whereas in non-VCA counties, there will be one-day polling places available, and voters will have to get vote-by-mail ballots if they request them, whereas the voters in VCA counties will automatically be mailed vote-by-mail ballots whether they requested them or not. So this makes it a little challenging for voter educators, the media, election officials to do targeted messaging to your community without confusing voters in neighboring communities that may share the same media market. This slide gives you an idea of the geography of where the Voters' Choice Act is being implemented, and you can see There are a lot of, there's Bay Area counties that are in a Bay Area media market. There's Sacramento region counties that are in the Sacramento Central Valley media market. Then what we're doing in Sacramento County, where I'm very involved in helping with the implementation process, and I see a lot of my partners here in the room who are also working very hard in Sacramento. Go to the next slide, please. Is we've developed this hashtag Sac County Votes, and that's actually become the slogan for Sacramento Voters Choice Act, Sac County Votes. So we're using that in our messaging to try to distinguish that that this is applying to Sacramento County voters only. And in fact, Sacramento had an open house on Monday. I was very happy to see the media coverage on the news say very explicitly, if you're a Sacramento County voter, pay attention. So they are getting that message out. Next topic, this is going to be real fast. Signature verification and vote by mail. So vote by mail is very popular, as we know. One of the important features of voting by mail is that you put your ballot in an envelope and you need to sign that envelope in order for your ballot to be counted. So there's a signature verification process that the California Voter Foundation has been studying for a while. I know many people in this room have also been focused on this, and Asian Americans Advancing Justice and Dr. Mindy Romero, who's here. We've made a lot of improvements in California to reduce the number of rejected signatures, but we still have a lot of room for improvement. And in 2016, we had 58,000 ballots statewide rejected largely because of signature problems. We've given a grace period for getting your ballot in as long as it's postmarked by Election Day. And we have provided a new law that allows people to send in a signature that's missing. But the last big hurdle is dealing with signature verification and the fact that under current law, voters are not notified when they vote that their ballot has been rejected and when they're not given a chance to provide a valid signature, which is contrary to all of the neighboring states in the country that have similarly implemented this law in Oregon, in Washington, and Colorado. So we are out of step on this. And the good news is, if we go to the next slide, the ACLU filed a lawsuit, which just this week, the judge ruled in favor of, challenging California's law that does not require this notification. And largely, I believe, because of this lawsuit, there's pending legislation now, SB 759, which would change the law and require counties to notify voters when their signatures are being rejected and give them a chance to submit a valid signature. So there's some improvements coming. The bill doesn't yet have an urgency clause in it, so it doesn't look like it's going to be in effect for 2018. But in the meantime, we are urging California Voter Foundation is urging county registrars to take it upon themselves, as some already do, and do that outreach for voters and give them a chance to correct and what's called cure your ballot. But our concern is that with the increase in vote by mail, especially going to people who've never done it before, that we may see an increase in signature rejection because you have more people now casting vote by mail ballots. So we're hoping we can prevent people from being disenfranchised in that way. So a couple of tips I want to give. How many people here are doing voter registration drives or working with groups doing voter reg drives? So the whole origin of this issue is the point of the voter registration application. And it's really important when you ask people to register to vote to tell them to pay attention to that signature that they put on the form. You might ask them to sign a second time and stick a copy of it in their wallet, or take a photo of the signature so they know how to match their ballot when they vote by mail. And if you register online, check your driver's license. So move on to the next slide. I'm running short on time. The third-party return of voted ballots is another issue that is new this year. We have a new law that allows anyone to return other people's ballots. This could be a benefit for people doing ballot parties and voting together with people that they trust, but it also could cause some problems if people feel they're being intimidated. So it's just important to know your rights in this area. If we could move on to the next slide. Next slide, please. You have the right to cast a secret ballot. You should only give your ballot to someone else to turn in if you trust them. And you have the right to refuse to turn your ballot over to somebody if they ask for it. Moving on to foreign interference in our elections. The Secretary of State addressed this issue in his remarks, so I won't repeat what he said, but I do want to give you some talking points on the next slide. We're much better off than most states. We have voting systems not connected to the internet. We have paper ballots. We do post-election audits, and our legislature and governor are awarding likely more money in the budget to upgrade our voting systems. So when people say, why should I vote? The election's going to be hacked. you can tell them this, that we are not, we are better in shape than other states. And then lastly, the need to have more funding for elections. This funding is welcome, but it's not enough. We need to turn the mandates back on so that all counties have access to the resources that they need, provide services to the voters that they want. So what I want to encourage you all to do, if you go to the last slide, is if you encounter any candidates running for governor, now is the time to get them to make a commitment on the record to addressing this issue. So I have some sample questions here. You just go back to that last one again. You could take a look at these. If you're elected, what will you do to ensure that local governments get the support they need to provide voters with the services that they deserve? So I hope that you will join me in questioning the candidates for governor on this, because as we know, when people are candidates is when they make promises, and we need our next governor to promise to not do what our current governor's been doing on this issue. So thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker today is Dean Logan. Then we'll open it up for questions. So Dean's coming up here too. Okay.
We're gonna use that word.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here and to have an opportunity to kind of close out this panel. I wanted to come up here so I could see everyone and just take a moment. You know, the thing that I love about the future California elections is to be able to stand up here and look around this room and think that we've been doing this for 6 years and we have this many people who are here for a day to focus on the future of California elections is pretty phenomenal. And then I think about how we started the morning already with this panel and with the Secretary of State. And the thing that's great about the people in this room is we have our heads down, our boots on the ground, and we're here to do the work. So I want to step back for just a moment to offer a little bit of reflection and context to the conversation, because we're going to spend a whole day today looking at challenges and opportunities for 2018 and beyond. And I think it's important for us to step back and realize that when we started this 6 years ago, or even longer ago, and we set out this lofty goal of setting the future of California elections, when we sit here today, the list of things that have been accomplished through this collaboration and through having our heads down and our boots on the ground is pretty phenomenal. And you're hearing pieces of that. You heard pieces of that in the Secretary's speech this morning. You heard it in the individual examples in this particular panel. Each of those things is remarkable in and of itself. The collective accomplishment of that is pretty phenomenal. So I want to just acknowledge that when we think about the future of California elections from where we started with this collective and this collaboration, that future has arrived. We have accomplished that. And I think the challenge today, because this panel was asked to talk about the opportunities and the challenges, the challenge today is to celebrate that future has arrived, but recognize that future is always developing. Future is not a final destination. So we now need to set the new frontiers. Where are we going to go from here? And where are we going to perfect this laundry list of things that we've accomplished and make sure that we move forward and that we don't retreat as a result of that. So just to touch on a few of those things, the progress we've made in terms of language accessibility and disability access, in terms of raising, first and foremost, the awareness of those issues and how important they are to the design of how voting is delivered, whether that be in the equipment or in the model of how we do that, has become part and parcel of the regulatory environment, part of the design of new voting equipment in ways that never existed before. And that certainly transcends beyond California. One of the big victories that we don't even talk about anymore because it's been so successful, but when we started all this, one of the first accomplishments was getting online voter registration. And that was a game changer. It moved us forward. And now we've gone beyond that to the automated voter registration that you've heard about, and to moving to conditional voter registration that we're just dipping our toes into in terms of the ability and the impact that that's going to have. We passed Senate Bill 360 years ago, which set new voting system standards in California that allow for the development of new and innovative voting solutions, like the work that we're doing in Los Angeles County on a publicly owned, open source platform-based voting system. We've seen leaps and bounds in campaign finance transparency, voter lookup tools that used to be a local function and now are a statewide function. We saw the passage of the Voters' Choice Act, and you've heard how the first 5 counties are going forward with that this year. Finally, the implementation of VoteCal, Those are just a sampling, and that's a pretty phenomenal list. So I think there's a lot to be celebrated there. I think you can hear in the comments from the people who spoke before me, and even in the questions that were asked of Secretary Padilla this morning, that these things are not easy. The implementation and the delivery on the promise or the vision of these activities that we collectively have worked on will not happen seamlessly. There will be challenges along the way. We live in a state that is decentralized and that is funded or not funded on a decentralized basis, which means a lot of these things, in order for them to happen, somebody has to pioneer them. Somebody has to be the incubator county or the county that's willing to step up and go first. And that means that we're going to learn things along the way, and we're going to learn how to perfect those systems. So whether that's the development of a new voting system under a new voting model or the 5 counties that are going forward with the Voters' Choice Act, there's going to be a lot to be learned. What's important is that we do go forward, that we recognize and remember why we worked so hard for these reforms, what it is that we wanted to accomplish with those, face those challenges, but not retreat, not go back. We've done that in this state before, where we faced challenges on the security of voting systems and we retreated and we lost time. We've surpassed that now, and it's important with things like the Voters' Choice Act and the modernized voter registration policies that have been adopted in California, that we move forward with those and that we don't retreat. So when I think about the challenge of 2018, and I reflected this yesterday in the legislative hearing on security, is that California benefits from a policy foundation that helps ensure the security of our voting systems. And you heard the Secretary speak about that before. Things that we all believe in. A well-established voting system certification process, the requirement of a paper-based ballot that can be verified by voters and that's subject to post-election auditing, a clear emphasis on transparency and accountability, and a set of voting system standards that support future development and innovation. What we lack in California, and this is the challenge, and I think where we can all make a difference here, is our core elections infrastructure is largely outdated and unmatched to that policy foundation. So we need an investment, and we need the support to bring the technology and the systems to support these policies forward. We know most counties in the state are using outdated equipment and technology. We know that there's a lack of a funding base for that, and Kim talked about that a little bit. The good news is we have raised the voice on that collectively in this room, and the governor has included in his proposed budget $134 million in funding for voting system equipment replacement. That's a good sign. That means that we've been heard and that we're raising the bill, but we need to keep that voice loud, because $134 million is insufficient. It will not get us to where we need to be to fully realize the vision and the power of the policy foundation that's been set in California. So as we go through today and look at where do we want to see the next chapter of our future, and as we look at things like the challenge of security and the challenge of the disparity of different counties and different funding, I hope that we all will go forth with a spirit that we've had a lot accomplished here and that there's more to be accomplished, and we can best do that by challenging each other, but also standing together and working towards a bright future for California elections.
Thank you, Dean. Pretty amazing group of speakers this morning. So we're going to open it up to questions now, and I brought my camera, so I'll take you. Have any questions on this? Yes, right here. Our mic runner. Oh, here we go, Stephanie. Oh, good. Me too. Yeah. Wait.
Okay. Hi, Jeanette Heitman, Service Center for Independent Life, and a member of the LA County VAC. Mr. Logan, I would like to encourage you or ask if you're planning on having better training for the accessible voter machines for LA County. In the last election, we did have some issues with the machines, and some of the volunteer poll workers were not, let's say, tech savvy, and calling the emergency line for accessibility. That line helps, but having a faster response for accessible voting is really, really important. And just to piggyback on Ever, the head of the NFB for California, these voting systems need to be more accessible to those voters with a disability. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the question, and I couldn't agree with your closing statement more. I think what we know and we've been very clear on is that the voting systems that have been available on the commercial market, which is a very limited market, and was not really were really not designed with voters in mind. They were designed for election administration and designed for regulatory compliance. We're trying to shift that in LA County with our focus on the voting solutions for all people. We have highlighted accessibility of that equipment, wanting to make a uniform process that serves all voters. We know that the equipment that we have in our polling places today has limited ability to serve voters with disabilities. To your point, we still have to go through a couple more election cycles on that equipment, and we will enhance the training, and we will take the feedback. Thank you for participating in our VAC. But I also think that that's part of this vision I talked about here, is that the move to the Voters' Choice Act offers opportunities for serving voters with disabilities that never existed before, and we need to be sure that we hold ourselves accountable to that it is a better system, and that we demonstrate that.
Great. We have another question here.
Yes, hello. My name is Raymond Lutz with Citizens Oversight. Now, one of the things that happened last year, which was a retreat, was AB 840, where KCO came in and basically gutted the 1% manual tally law through a sleazy operation of modifying a bill that was about signatures on VBM ballots, and changed the law about 1% manual tally late in the game to roll back so that about 40% of the ballots in most districts like San Diego won't be subject to the audit at all. And this was conducted mostly at the behest of Dean Logan. And I'll let you know, through our review, the audit process in Los Angeles will do more to cover up any kind of a big hack rather than expose it.
Do you have a question?
And so, yeah, my question is, why aren't you talking about AB 840? Okay. And why are you retreating from doing the 1% manual tally correctly? And why, Mr. Logan, do you have a bad system for doing that so that you cover up hacks?
Do you want to take that question?
Well, there's a lot I'd love to respond to on that, but probably it's not particularly constructive in this forum. I think that the record of California Association of Clerks and Election Officials speaks for itself. I talked about that in my comments earlier today. We can disagree on what a bill did, and we can disagree on what the legislative history was on the 1% manual tally. What I think we all agree on, and this was addressed at the hearing yesterday, if you had a chance to see it or to view it online, is the registrars of voters in this state feel very strongly about post-election auditing, and we're working on a bill to introduce risk-limiting audit, which is a statistically significant based audit that is intended to demonstrate that the outcome was correct. That's a different objective than what the original 1% manual tally was. We're working in collaboration with stakeholders who want to collaborate and who share that vision to bring that to the legislature. And that was the spirit with which we approach all legislation, including AB 840 last year.
Right now, there's only
Okay, we'll go to the next question. We have a woman over here. Thank you. Thank you.
Catherine Gabsey with the League of Women Voters, Pasadena area. And I was also a volunteer poll worker for many years in Alameda County. I am a little confused now about what's going to happen going forward at the new vote centers as pertains to conditional ballots, not conditional registration, conditional ballots. If someone walks in to a vote center, they are legally and correctly registered. They don't have a mail-in ballot with them. They want to vote. What process will be followed now as opposed to what has been done at the regular polling places?
All right, go ahead.
Thanks for the hello. Thanks for the question. Right now, we do anticipate this is going to happen. Obviously, we're mailing ballots to everyone. If someone comes in, we're going to check them in because we're going to have our election management system at each vote center. We're going to be able to look up the voter. If the voter is in the system, They're going to sign a roster. In this case, it's going to be a label. So we'll have a signature, and they're going to get a ballot. They can choose to vote that ballot at that time at the vote center, or if they want an envelope, we'll give them a ballot and an envelope, and they will choose to use it as a vote by mail ballot. That's going to be the procedure there. And it's important and it's very constructive because, again, it's going to eliminate the provisional ballot for us. We're going to have our election management system there, so the voter will be able to get the correct ballot type, and again, the voter will be able to cast that ballot.
I just want to add something. Is this on? Oh, there it goes. We're working in Sacramento County on this, and these details are being figured out kind of as we go. And so, fortunately, the Secretary of State issued a memo to the registrars last fall saying that that voters would be able to cast regular ballots, not vote by mail ballots, at vote centers. And we feel it's very important to preserve that right because not everybody wants to put their ballot inside an envelope. We are dealing with a lot of these issues in Sacramento as well. And one thing that I was happy to learn is that at the drop-off locations, there will be envelopes on top of each drop box in Sacramento County. So if a voter comes, has their ballot but didn't bring their envelope, they'll have an envelope there that they can fill out and drop in. If a voter comes to a vote center, though, and brings their ballot, Greg is grimacing at what I'm saying, if they bring their ballot into a vote center, though, they will have to be issued a new ballot because they can't just put that ballot inside a regular envelope. That's how Sacramento is.
Hello. Nevada is not.
Everyone's going to be able to.
If a ballot shows up into one of the drop boxes, it's going to be very difficult to count if we don't have that envelope and associated signature with it.
And that's why Sacramento's putting envelopes on top of the drop boxes, which are all inside the indoor location, so you can get an envelope, fill it out, and put your ballot inside of it if you didn't bring it.
Just quick follow-up. As a poll worker, the issue we encountered most often was people who forgot their mail-in ballot. And so my hope is that the people staffing these new voting centers will be adequately trained to know how to handle these situations, which of course brings up the whole problem of recruiting and training poll workers.
I'm hoping everybody who's here is going to volunteer and work at a vote center or polling place.
I think that's part of the beauty of the Voter Choice Act, being able to offer enhanced training to a reduced number of people to staff the vote centers. Again, as far as I'm concerned, it's a one-stop shop. We will be able to answer and satisfy any query, question, situation that you have.
Other questions? I'm going to look over here too. We have one over here, then we'll go here.
Hi, thank you all. My name is Joel Snyder. I'm a high school civics teacher in South Los Angeles. And and I had, in 2016, for the first time, I had students participate in the poll worker program, student poll worker program, and it was a pretty incredible experience for them. And this may be specific to you, Mr. Logan, but just generally, and I hope this is the right forum for this. Is there anything kind of in the pipeline to expand, to, treat that program more broadly? Because it's a really effective program, and I think a lot of teachers are not finding, they just don't know about it as much as they could, or students aren't accessing as well as they could. So thank you.
Well, first, thank you and your students for participating in the program. It's a vital part of our program here in LA County. Our goal is to have a student poll worker in every one of our polling places. We don't always achieve that, but the numbers keep growing. The challenge for us is really having a dedicated person like yourself at the particular school who is willing to champion the program. And we continue to do outreach on that. And I'd be happy to talk with you about ways to recognize the students. As we move forward in 2020 to going towards the Voters' Choice Act, we also want to adapt that program because we still want to have students active in that program as well. So look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I actually have a question I'm going to ask Lori. On the new motor voter law that prompted me, Are they going to do the pre-registration too? So a 16-year-old coming in and getting a license for the first time, how's that going to work?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it will allow for pre-registration as well.
That's going to be great, yeah. Get the youth involved. All right, we had a question over here in the back, right? Do you still have a question? And then we'll go there. Okay, okay, is that okay? He had his, there than there.
Good morning, Neil Albrecht from the City of Milwaukee, Wisconsin Election Commission. I've traveled a very long way to ask this question.
Well, yeah.
Great city on a great lake. Wisconsin has had same-day registration occurring at polling places since 1975. I'm curious if that is an objective for the state of California to move toward offering same-day registrations at polling places, particularly given that it is truly a one-stop shop that increases voter participation.
I think Lori's got something on that, or Joe?
I would say that yes, that is where California wants to go. Same day registration, where I would look at it more as a vote center where you have the technology to provide all the services that Greg just described. And I think we will be getting there. I think that California probably, because of its population, has different challenges and the diversity of the population here. But most definitely, like I said in my presentation, I think where we want to go as a state is having vote centers. Ideally, most counties would be all vote by mail, but those vote centers would be open not only on election day, but the 4 days prior to election day, and providing all services so that people can vote and get the ballot that they're supposed to get.
Give it a second. Just takes a second.
There we go. Yeah, I just want to, and Joe probably knows where I'm going with this because we've agreed to disagree on certain aspects of this. But and it's true that as we move to vote centers, same-day registration will be more widely available in those counties. But we don't know how quickly counties will move to vote center models. And so I just would like to plant the seed that, I don't think that the technology or vote centers should be a barrier to offering same-day registration at all polling sites. The ballot issue that Joe was explaining, if we offered it at every polling site, it would work the same way it works now. You wouldn't have to have every ballot type at every polling site. You would simply go to your neighborhood polling site. If you ended up at the wrong polling site, you could be directed to the correct. You could have a roster and point people in the right direction. If you chose to vote there provisionally, your vote would count for most elections, and we would reduce the disenfranchisement that I'm concerned we'll have by virtue of the fact that same-day registration in many counties will only be offered at a county election site. And if you don't have the flexibility at your job or whatever the barriers are that you already face, that it will not be accessible to people who need it the most. And I know that there's a panel on this later, and they'll talk about that. But I think that we need to work together, and when we think about goals for the future, that one of those should be to work together to figure out how we can make same-day registration accessible to every voter, even if you're in a county that doesn't have a vote center model.
And I just give it a second.
Wanted to add on a little clarification. There is voter registration that happens at polling places right now. If you have moved since you last voted, but you've moved within your county and you go to your new polling place, you will be invited to re-register to vote and cast a provisional ballot, and your registration will get updated and your ballot will be counted. And so there is a fail-safe there. It doesn't help everybody. It doesn't help people who move between counties. It doesn't help people who are newly registered. But you know what? As we move into more automated voter registration and those people do get automatically registered, and as young people move around, that fail-safe can help capture some of those voters and keep them from slipping through the cracks. So I just want to make sure people understand that there is a degree of voter registration that's happening at polling places right now.
Thank you. We had a question in the back over here.
Yeah, I've always thought that the so-called two big parties, which everybody knows are really one, have way too much power. And I've wondered, can you do anything about the problem of people not knowing who the certified write-in candidates are in an election, because I know this state does have certified write-in candidates. For example, Bernie Sanders was a certified write-in candidate in the 2016 presidential general election. And a lot of people thought he wasn't even running because of a contract he had with the Democratic Party. He couldn't actually tell people he was still running, but he was. And when it came to the polling places, they had a list of certified write-in candidates, but most of the polling places kept that list under a stack of other stuff so nobody could see it. And I'm wondering if maybe you could make some effort to either make a complete list of candidates that would include that list, or just that list itself available at each of the polling booths. Maybe, you know, post it up inside of the booth or something, so that anybody voting in that election would be able to know these are the choices they have, instead of thinking, you know, just because the news only covered 2 candidates, therefore there are only 2 candidates to choose from.
Okay, maybe our registrars could. You want to take that out?
Well, I guess what I would say about that, I mean, I think you're right. There is a certified list of candidates. It is required to be to each polling place. I think that your story of it being buried under supplies tells the story that I think led to the movement towards the Voters' Choice Act. Is that what we ask of poll workers? And you've heard here today how difficult it is to recruit poll workers and to train poll workers. And really, I think that many of you probably have served as poll workers. And what we ask of poll workers is ridiculous. I mean, we bring them in, we do a 4 to 6 hour training at best. We give them a carload full of supplies and send them out there and ask them to work a 13 to 15 hour day and to remember all of these things. That is a recipe for inconsistency and for problems. What the Voters' Choice Act offers through the vote centers is the opportunity to centralize that, to have better training, a different staffing model, and that will allow the opportunity to be sure that things like language materials and lists of certified write-in candidates and other things are more visible and made available. That voter registration can happen not just on election day, but at over a course of 11 days. So I think that I go back to my earlier remarks. I think that's, if we really want to fully embrace the vision of the reforms that we're all seeking, we have to provide the infrastructure and the funding support to make that happen. Simply, simply to change it to what you're saying and say, instead of making it available at the table to put it in every booth, that's still relying on poll workers to remember that in amongst the checklist of the 80 other things that we ask them to do when they're setting up between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. So your point's well taken. I appreciate it. And I think that we do, as registrars, want voters to know all of the choices that are available to them. We just need to have an infrastructure and an environment that allows for doing that more efficiently.
There is something I want to add to that. The electors for Bernie Sanders, I and several others contacted the Secretary of State's office beforehand about that, and they had told us that it would be required that those papers be displayed where people could see them on their way in. When we found that they weren't being displayed, that they were actually being buried under stuff, we called them back again, and they changed their story and said, no, it's actually not required, it's suggested. And so, yeah, maybe something there's got to change, at any rate. And thank you for addressing it. Appreciate it.
And just so I could speak a little bit for all registrars, I mean, we really want to make sure everything is accessible, and mistakes do happen. But if I'm alerted to anything like that, we get on it right away and correct it. So the information is posted and available. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're like at 11:59 is my clock, and we're over here at 10, right? So I just want to, I'm sorry, at 11, right? We're over at 11 at this one. One more question.
Please address the issue that we're technology dependent. And we used to say voting never stops. If the machine isn't working, you keep voting. But now if everything is technologically dependent, what happens when it goes down? Because, okay.
Go ahead.
Very serious issue.
Yeah, no, in every case, there is paper backup. If any technology does go down, the paper is there as a backup. In one of my first elections, it was a 2003 recall of the governor, we actually ran out of ballots. And the law allows you to photocopy those ballots and then transform them to a regular ballot when you get back. So in every case, there are backups and paper-based backups so that you do keep voting. You're absolutely right.
Also, another thing to keep in mind is that one of the advantages of the Voters' Choice Act is that it changes elections from the one-day sale model to something that's less pressure on everybody. So, you know, if there is a problem with a ballot on demand machine, there can be redundancy, but there can also be the fact that that person can come back later if necessary.
All right.
We didn't have that before in the one-day sale model.
I'm over my time, and I promised to stick to the 11 o'clock hour. So thank you all very much, and you have a great day.